Hi there and welcome to another edition of Black and Azul. Appreciate everybody for being so patient with us this evening as we come on air live from Avaya Stadium. The Earthquakes lose their fourth match in a row, and they lose their first game in a long time here at Avaya Stadium. Their first loss since March 30th. Our panel tonight: Alex Morgan, Tom Marshall, Joel Soria, Charles Wollin, and Jamon Moore is going to be joining us in a little bit. We've got big time stuff happening on the panel. But lads, let's start with your instant snap reaction of this evening's game. It didn't go without any controversy, obviously, here again today.
Yeah, a controversial night with a plethora of storylines. I mean, to start things off, you have Chris Wondolowski, coming through and actually, joining the Ultras. Then the first goal comes, the roof comes off of Avaya Stadium. He takes his shirt off. That seemed to be like the storyline of the night, above LAFC winning the Supporters Shield, in my opinion. And then things start going sour really quick. 45th minute, things get kicked off. Quakes kick things off in the quintessential way. Goal gets called back, and then the demise happens, right? Philadelphia gets that tying goal, and then late in the 70th minute, they get over and they walk off with 3 points. And I think the general feeling here at Avaya Stadium is that the Quakes were cheated once again.
It's interesting. I don't know. It's difficult to sum up everything that went on there. But honestly, obviously, we're going to talk about the decisions, the refereeing decisions, the VAR decisions. But honestly, watching that game, especially at half-time, first 10 minutes of the second half, I never felt like the Earthquakes were going to lose. I never felt they weren't going to win. I just thought 1-0 up here, the next goal's coming, they look very confident. There wasn't a moment when I thought, nah, they're not going to do this. And then all of a sudden, that goal gets called back from VAR, and I think then they kind of, I don't know, obviously within the group, you guys know because you're here, there is the feeling, I think, that everybody, it's the world against them. Yeah. And I think that kind of it's almost like a blow that they just couldn't recover from. They were 2-0 up. They were coasting, they were going to get the vital 3 points. And all of a sudden it's 1-0. And then you saw Philadelphia as well just kind of like perk up a little bit and like, come on, we're still in this. So yeah, I thought the wheels fell off then, and obviously the VAR decisions. I mean, there was 4 of them. If you look at it, there was 4.
Right.
I think there was the first that could have easily been a red card in the first half for the Philadelphia Union defender. There's a Judson yellow.
Carlos Fierro.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was a clear red.
It could have easily been a red, And then you've got the Judson yellow card where you're like, he's just made a good tackle, and all of a sudden it's a yellow card, and you can see in the players' minds what all that's building up.
Right.
And that builds up to the VAR, and then it builds up to the offside, and then it builds up to the penalty, and then you get a 2-1 loss when it really shouldn't have been.
And keep in mind, Judson's not going to be playing against the Seattle Sounders on Sunday, so that in and of itself is also a crucial blow for the San Jose Earthquakes.
Yeah, I think that's one of the worst outcomes from tonight's match. Judson will not be available to play the Seattle Sounders. And now that's going to be, a must-win match for the Quakes. This was really a gutting performance. With the win, they would have been able to put themselves in a really solid position going into their last 2 matches, but now they're on the outside looking in. They're 44 points, sorry. Portland and Dallas sharing 45 points. So the Quakes will really need to take 3 or 4 points away from their last 2 games to feel comfortable that they have a shot at making the playoffs. It was really a deflating second half. They had all the momentum in the first half, but then, the VAR decision to call back their goal right at the start of the second half, that was the deflating moment. It felt like, here we go again. You could sense the energy that the team had, and that was in Avaya Stadium. It was one of the most raucous stadiums I think I've seen, one of the most best atmospheres I think I've seen at Avaya Stadium, with Chris Wondolowski leading the San Jose Ultras. But then you can just sense the energy was sucked out at that moment, and the Quakes were never able to recover.
It was a library here after the first and definitely after the second goal. Just to piggyback off what you were saying, Tom, I don't know if it's because the Quakes are viewed as the blue-collar team of MLS, that's why they take advantage of this team, or or people might say that, but you know, it's a reoccurring pattern here. The Quakes have been the victim, or at least in the eyes of many have been the victim, and I mean, we don't have to go that far back into the timeline. We can just look back at their previous game in Atlanta. You know, Wando, obviously Espinosa, and Matias Almeida all get sent off. That was the talk. The talk of the league when they played against LAFC in Los Angeles as well. Meltdown after meltdown, but is it really a meltdown, or is it injustice? I think is the biggest question.
No, I think it's a bit of both. You know, I definitely think Matias Almeida, if you look at his mentality, his character, he likes that. You know, it's like a bit like Jose Mourinho and stuff. They like to build that us against the world. We're gonna, you know, we can take anybody on. And I honestly thought tonight they would come out and react, and after those kind of defeats on the road, come back here and win convincingly. Because I don't think they've been playing badly. You know, even against LAFC, you look at the scoreline and you think, well, that's a very one-sided game. But I was actually at that game, and it was like, if key things would have gone slightly different, then, you know, the Earthquakes would have been in that game until at least late in the game. So yeah, I think it's a bit of both to answer you.
But is it fair to say that maybe this isn't the league for Matias to continue being that manager that he tends to be? You know, MLS has really strict guidelines, at least in comparison to Liga MX.
Yeah, I can't believe he's going to get this run of bad decisions again, though.
Right.
You know, I think this is, you can't believe. We'll see what happens on Sunday, but you can't imagine that this just the repetitive nature of these decisions are like, I don't know. It just seems like a freak, you know.
It seems like drama seems to follow this team. I think in the first 5 games it was this slow, long kind of death from the year before bleeding into this year. And one of the first shows, I think I referred to the Quakes being like a Hamlet or a Macbeth. And then the summer was a bit like a Midsummer Night's Dream for the Quakes. But now we're back to this.
Here.
Yeah, we're back to Hamlet. We're back to this Macbeth. It seems like every single decision and every single game there's so much drama. There's so much drama. I mean, the Atlanta game, so much drama. This game, so much drama. LAFC, so much drama. And
subplots.
But what it comes down to is the Quakes had a 1-0 lead, and they weren't able to kill the game off. And Carlos Fierro, in on the 41st minute, chance on a goal. He brings the ball down, somewhat of an okay-ish touch in my mind, and then he blasts it right at the goalkeeper. And this is a guy as well that's come into this side. He's been giving his chances. He's been at rock bottom, and this is a chance for him to prove himself. And so my question is, I know he's come in from a little bit of criticism and some shtick, but what do you make of his performance? I mean, he had some good opportunities this evening to make it 2-0, to put the game away, in addition, of course, to this VAR decision. But, want to hear your thoughts specifically on that.
I think a lot of the loss weighs down on Fierro. I think a lot was expected of him today. He just did not live up to the expectations. Once again, we've talked about how Espinosa truly unlocks Vaco's, effectiveness within the field. We didn't see a productive Vaco, probably because Fierro himself was struggling. He did have a couple of shots on goal, and when he had his chances, he didn't finish. And off the ball, I don't think he really fits that mold of the player who's going to be running up and down the flank to try and win the ball back in that Matias mindset. So it's just another poor performance from him. And I think this time specifically, the loss, although it's a collective loss, Fierro, it could be culpable for it.
Look, I think this is actually one of his more active games going forward. Right. Charles, you mentioned he had that chance. He was in behind. Andre Blake made a good save in that one-on-one situation.
Sure.
But generally,
was it a good save or just a poor
I think
shot?
I think it was a hard ball. It was off the volley. It wasn't exactly in front of him. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt in that situation. But I think generally, look, he's not the difference maker that Espinosa is when he steps out on the field. He's also, I haven't seen enough defensive work from him to justify a starting role. I would have liked to see Shea Salinas start. And I assume Tom has followed him for longer. So, is this, was he overhyped, or is he, not performing as well as we should expect?
No, I mean today's the story. With how many minutes did he play? 70 minutes or something? That's the story of his career.
Right.
In 70 minutes, because he does show stuff. You know, we talked about the red card. I mean, he was able to get behind that defender. He could have been 1-on-1. And all of a sudden, if the Union go down to 10 players, then it's Fierro. Look at that. He's done something really good. But it's the finish at the other end. I mean, that's been the big problem with his game, the end product. I mean, the crossing, the finishing. He's always been lightning quick.
His crosses were awful.
I don't think he connected a single cross tonight.
No,
and he took 10 cracks at it.
You go back to when he was this kid was 16, 17, 18, and there were Premier League clubs looking at him.
Barcelona was one of them too.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a thing that you just can't train. He's lightning quick. Yeah. You can't teach the speed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But my feeling with Fierro is he's going to end up playing right back. I think he's going to play. He needs to improve defensively.
Almeida has hinted at that time and time again.
Because I just don't think he gives you enough in the final third. You know, obviously compared to Espinosa, who, you look at his production figures and they're ridiculous. And Fierro, I don't think he's going to give you that.
Do you think he has the defensive work right there? Because maybe it was just his tactical. He was playing further forward, but tonight it seemed like he wasn't tracking back a couple times. He got caught in behind the, he got caught watching as his defender ran in behind.
I mean, no. I mean, from what when you look at him like that, no. But then again, Almeida, I think you have to trust in him as well. Yeah. I mean, you look at the players tonight, and they're playing in different positions than you would have thought they would have played at the start of the season. They've adjusted. A lot of them have adjusted well. I think it's been one of the positives of the season, no. And I think that Tommy Thompson, I don't know if people would have thought he would be good enough defensively to play as a fullback, and I think Fierro is going to need a pre-season as well. He's going to need a pre-season to properly work with his players, because obviously this is his first time playing outside of Mexico as well, and it's very different. I mean, the level might be slightly lower here than in Mexico, but the system, the way the defenders play is different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say about Fierro, in some ways you feel really sorry for him because he's so devoid of confidence when he's out there. And I think that's a big issue. When he missed his chance and he had and he was injured too, he had a head wrap on, he looked up to the skies, and just his body language protrudes everything of his tone on the pitch. He knew that he had chances tonight, and I think he's going to need some serious, continue to be molding, and what Tom was saying about him playing potentially right back or left back under Almeida. I think that's absolutely the case for him, because he's one of Almeida's people that he's brought in, and he's one of Almeida's guys. He's been loyal to him, and obviously he's on the pitch for a reason, at being selected over Shea Salinas, over a Paul Marie, over other players that could be, out there on the wing. Let's talk a little bit about Nick Lima as well at the left back position tonight, and in general. I know there's also a little bit of lapses that he's had, and it hasn't always looked the part, and transitioning, and Joel, your great reporting, chatting about him moving from right back to have to play left back under Almeida. Does he seem to be a little nervous out there, and maybe his head in a different place? Because you see him there, and he loves getting up and down on the right back spot, and he plays this weird defensive right wing back position for Greg Berhalter. But at this left back spot, does he still need some time to transition? And is he also having an issue with confidence out there?
Sure. I think the biggest problem, for the fullbacks and just for this team in general is that, for the last couple of weeks, it's been the same storyline. The Quakes have not been able to replicate the attacking style that they were putting together, week in and week out. The latest one was against the Vancouver Whitecaps here at home, where they put out a record 43 shots on target, 43 shots, about 19 on target. That type of play is really, really just going to, make these situations that much easier. Right now, I guess you can throw any player under the bus and say he didn't play so well. I think Nick Lima today was subpar. I think the back line in general was subpar. That second goal, the back line was completely...
It was a nothing goal.
Right.
It was an absolutely nothing goal, the second one.
Everyone was ball watching.
And
flat-footed.
To me, my eyes turn to Paul Murray. You know, he's a youngster who hasn't seen that much time this season. He's brought in on that right side for Tommy Thompson, and frankly, that baffled me. It didn't seem like he was up to par for this occasion, and he simply gave. I'm not sure who it was who put in the cross, but he gave the crosser way too much time to float in a ball straight, and Philadelphia took their chance.
Yeah, I think there's only one Union player in the box as well, if I remember rightly, or certainly near the ball and then to not be able to defend that as well, right in front of the goalkeeper is. I don't know. And we can talk about the attack, but I mean the defense as well was. I don't know. It was.
At the end, I think at the end of the day, the officiating heavily influenced the result, but I don't think we can shy away from the actual tactical realities of tonight, right? The fact that the Quakes were simply just not doing enough offensively and defensively, as we just mentioned, they weren't up to par. And that's the reality. I don't think either team played an exceptional game. If you look at the stats line, it will tell you the same. It will tell you the same thing.
It's pretty even.
It's pretty even. I mean, both teams generated less than 10 shots, less than 5 shots on target. The possession was obviously on the Quakes side. The possession has been on the Quakes side for the majority of the season. But it was just a so-so game from both sides, and it's the small details that matter. And today, like in many cases in the past couple of weeks, the details, like the officiating, has just not been on the Quake side.
And honestly, I think if you ask me, the damage was already done in the Atlanta game. Not having Wando, not having Espinosa, those are two difference makers who also raised the energy that the Quakes desperately needed in that second half. So I think to some extent the damage was already done.
It really just all started in Los Angeles, though. You just have to link back to that game. The meltdown that Matias had sent a strong message to the league, but I think it also hurt this team internally. I don't think they've been able to bounce back from that, to be completely honest. And I think it caught many off guard.
I think this is the big question now. I mean, after this run of results, especially today, because I think you can say, we're on the road with the travelling, it's difficult playing against a top team like Atlanta, but then you to come back here and lose and to kind of, the same issues to have come up with the officiating. How does Almeida now change the conversation? What's his message? You can't, as a manager like that, you can't use the same message after every game. They screwed us over. They screwed us over. They screwed us over. Okay, but what now? There's 2 games left. How do you, like I think we all agree, or that 2-0 when the VAR changed the decision,
right,
and it went back to 1-0. I think that affected the players. Yeah, how does Almeida get over that hurdle now? How does he change it and say, you know what, forget all the referee and the officiating, now he's got to go and get it done? So the players, I don't know, the players just seem like they're almost trying too hard, like they're just on edge, they're just kind of so tense and fired up to do the job for Almeida, and I think they clearly believe in him. But it's almost like too much, and one decision goes against him, and then all of a sudden the kind of, I don't know,
thinking kind of linearly. Might that be the case, that they're just thinking one way, and that's the way that Matias has been preaching lately, which has, in a way, also put a big target on their back, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know you guys are going to talk about the decision, but that the penalty decision. I mean, once the referee's given that, first of all, I'm not really sure why you'd even, go back to VAR.
I wouldn't go back to VAR.
There wasn't a clear error, And then after that, he's made the decision, gone over to watch it, and then the referee's kind of walked out back into the penalty area. Yeah. And he's just kind of wandered around for
2 minutes.
10 seconds. Yeah. And it's like, what's your decision? I mean, I think that either I felt like he wanted to be the kind of centre of attention, or he didn't actually know. He didn't actually know what his decision was going to be, and he was just having another think, like, is this right? Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? But like I said,
and those actions, to be fair, those actions also make it that much more difficult for Matias to move on, right, from sending the same message to his players. So it's almost like a revolving door. When is it going to end? When are both parties, both the officials or the officiating pro and the San Jose Earthquakes, going to compromise?
I honestly thought when the VAR went back to look at the yellow card with Fierro in the first half, I thought they were going to change that to red, and that was going to be the bang, right, they're playing against 10 players. They're going to win 3-4-0, and now it's turning the page and like move to the playoffs. But how wrong I was. Anyway,
certainly, lads. And now, you know, the road ahead is going to be quite interesting and a little bit rocky here, and the atmosphere at Avaya Stadium is going to be quite tense, I think, on Sunday, and there will be some nervousness around, similar to what you saw this evening here at Avaya for the final regular season home match against Seattle Sounders, a team that the Quakes went up to Seattle and played them pretty well, 2-2 in that match. And now the Quakes must need a result against Seattle here on Sunday, their biggest chance to pick up points in front of the home fans, an impeccable home record that they've got. You know, it must have to happen at some point, that they've got to pick up some sort of results here, some sort of points, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, they have to. I mean, there's no plan B now. You know, it's do or die. Sunday is do or die. They're going to have to do it, obviously, without Jutson. But they will have Cristian Espinosa and Chris Wondolowski back and Matias Almeida. So that will be a huge boost. And the Seattle Sounders, I think Jamon will be able to open up on them a little bit more. He's not sold on them completely. But yeah, I mean, there's just no more excuses. The Quakes have to go out there and they have to get the 3 points at all costs.
No more time.
And special thanks to Tom Marshall, who was just on. You can follow him at Mexico World Cup on Twitter. He does some phenomenal work for ESPN FC, doing all things Mexico, Liga MX. And we appreciate Tom for being on. And I throw directly to you, Jamon Moore, here sitting with us now, and you wrote an actual question to the referee, and you're here to read it out, and you actually have his response in front of you too.
We do. We have the actual handwriting. And by the way, no pressure to replace an ESPN writer.
No, not at all.
At all. But we do appreciate Tom coming on the program with his time in town. So there were two questions that I wrote out after the game, and I shared it with Alex, and I shared it with Robert Jonas, both of who are authorized to be able to ask the questions on behalf of the pool reporters. Just to give you a little peek behind the curtain, there's only 3 people on a list that are allowed to ask questions from the reporter pool to officials after the game. So while I wrote the questions, we needed someone to sign it. Robert was kind enough to do that and to take a look at the questions and make sure that they were the type of questions we would want to ask. And we could get, hopefully, a good response to.
And then Toledo elected to answer in writing.
Correct, and Toledo answered in writing as well. So the first question was, what did you see when you awarded the penalty to Rios that did not appear on the replay? And his response to this was, I believed I saw Colin made strong contact with Rios' lower body. Upon review, the replay showed the contact was incidental and did not warrant the awarding of a foul. There was a follow-up to that, which you asked Alex, which was, in your view, was Colin playing the ball? And Toledo's response was, in my view, the contact was incidental and did not warrant the awarding of a foul, basically repeating himself. So that's the question that we got there. Now, I did talk to a couple of the other media members up here after the game, and in both situations, neither one of them felt in the moment that it looked like a penalty.
You can name one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Ramiro Corrales was one of the ones that I talked to. Ted Ramey was another, although Ted admitted that he didn't get to see a replay and didn't have the best angle on it. And, it was definitely an interesting call that he called it to begin with, because at the time, from the angle that we saw in the press box, it did seem a little bit shoulder to shoulder. Like, I didn't see the contact that I thought would warrant a penalty. But at the same time, back to your point, Alex, I think that you made, was there a clear and obvious error? And I'm not sure that if that's what you saw in real time, what did you see in a replay that was clear and obvious that needed to be overturned? I think it could have gone either way, but in the moment you felt it was a penalty. It really feels like, the fans kind of get a little bit jerked around by that type of call, because these things are not explained to the fans in the stadium. And another thing that that Ted and I were talking about here just a bit before the show started was that just unlike the NFL or other sports we're used to in the United States, the fans don't get an explanation as to why calls are overturned and such. And so everyone's left looking at the replay going, what is clear and obviously wrong with this that they felt overturning? And I think the fans feel wronged by a lot of that. And I think in some ways the Husin callback as well from that one. So I have the second question if you guys want to jump into that, or we can stay on that first one if anyone has any comments.
So I think, as Jamon mentioned, there was a general consensus that it was not actually a penalty. I would disagree. I think there was really no attempt by Colin to play the ball, and he was falling into Rios. So I think that would have been a valid penalty. And then certainly there was no reason to turn it over. Yeah. If you call it in the first place, which was his call, I don't really buy the argument that he's seeing a clear and obvious error.
There's no clear and obvious error.
It seems to me that it definitely should not have been overturned in that manner.
In the moment, it feels like that standard is not held to. Like, maybe we got the call incorrect, or maybe we didn't see what we thought we saw, but is there a clear and obvious error? I'm not seeing that standard was actually used
here.
In this
I think,
case.
look, I think the call was wrong. First and foremost, I think the call was wrong. But I think what really infuriates fans, from my point of view, is the procedure. It's the circus that Toledo puts on after he takes a look at VAR, right? Absolutely. The fact that he's pacing around the box, the fact that he's trying to distance himself from Quakes players, and he's touching his ear and checking in on his earpiece, and he takes a bit more time. He lets the fans, soak it all in, and the bottles are being thrown, the chants are being tossed as well. It's that. It's exactly that that really, really drives the fans nuts.
And it's part of the reason why it was so deflating. Because it took so long, it was handled so poorly. If it had been, you call the penalty, you overturn it very quickly, it seemed to me the Quakes would have been able to move on. But the fact that it was so drawn out, I think really sucked a lot of energy out.
Yeah, and it's been this constant theme, lads, that that we've seen over and over and over again. The LAFC game, the NYCFC game, the Atlanta game, this game. You have to kind of wonder to yourself, when is this drama going to kind of end? Because you either get the second goal and you're 2-0 up and everyone's happy, everything's fine.
Or you also get the red card.
Or you get the red card, or you get some
on.
of these decisions going your way from the referees. But it seems like no call is going the Quakes' way right now. And it's, back to your point here, Joel, it's a combination of the result and trying to get the result with some kind of argy-bargy, very, very interesting calls from the referee. For me, it is a penalty as well. I mean, Aurelian Collin goes for the ball, shoulder to shoulder, and then he goes to ground and he dives in. And as he dives in, he comes in with his hand. He comes in with his hand to shield the ball with his right side.
And he falls in it.
And so usually, if it's just shoulder to shoulder and two players going,
the impact is midsection. It's not really shoulder to shoulder here.
Yeah, but as he's falling down,
exactly.
As he's falling down, he brings the arm out and shields it away. And that arm, for me, that arm should not be there. That's a clear penalty. And I mean, the fans have every right to be able to say what they feel and think what they think, because the Quakes haven't gotten a call all year, here. And it seems to be this cyclical thing. And the only way to break this cyclical thing is try to win the next 2 games and get into the playoffs. 6 points or 4 points.
Yeah, not only were the Quakes 0-for-3 on VAR tonight, but they had
0-for-4, actually.
questionable juice and yellow, right? And then they also had the situation, and it's not been talked about that much, but Tommy Thompson, who was not involved in a play, was called offside right when Husin had freed himself up and headed the ball toward the back post. They whistled a offside on Tommy Thompson, who's not in the play at all. And it's just baffling that it's just call after call after call after call. We do have the other one. So So the second question that the pool asked was, on the VAR goal reversal, were you looking at the frame of the ball that was touching the player's foot where Husin was offside, or the frame after where Husin was back onside? Okay. So I don't know if everyone remembers, but there were basically two frames, and they showed them on the scoreboard here, so I assume all the fans at home also saw it, because that's what Toledo was looking at, which was contact with the ball, he's offside. The next frame is the ball has moved away from the passer's foot, and now Husin is back onside. So the question was, which frame are you using there? Are you using the one where the player still has possession of the ball, or the one once you know that the ball has been released? And he said, at the moment the ball was played, Husin was in an offside position. Upon review, the match was restarted with an indirect free kick for the offside offense, which clearly doesn't address the question. So good follow-up here from Alex. Which specific frame from the replay informed your call, which got the answer we were looking for? He said the frame showing the kick point was utilized. In other words, the ball is touching the player's foot. That is the frame that was used. And I completely disagree with that. That is completely the incorrect frame to look at. And I keep seeing this over and over with VAR, and it's not just the Quakes. It is across this league. Yeah. They are picking the wrong frames upon which to make decisions. And if you just rewind back to the Portland match on Sunday a couple weeks ago, where clearly the ball is over the line on one frame and it's barely touching the line on the other frame, and they use the one where it's barely touching the line and not the one where it's over the line. It's baffling.
The frame you should use is when the ball has been released from his foot. That is when it is offsides. It does not make sense to use the frame in which it's the kick point. And look, VAR may not be perfect. You may not have the exact frame you need. In that case, I think the benefit of the doubt has to go to the attacker. That's what it was before VAR existed. The benefit of the doubt goes to the attacker. So I think in the situation where VAR might not give you the perfect answer, the benefit of the doubt should go to Danny Husin in that situation.
VAR is perfect. It's the people behind it. That's really what it comes down to. It's the judgment of the human, of the individual. Obviously, the people that the league has given, authority to are just not, they're not doing the right job. They're just not living up to what they're supposed to be executing day in and day out. It's atrocious. It's lamentable. It's baffling. When is this going to end? Who knows?
Look, I don't think that VAR is inherently good or inherently bad. It's a tool. VAR is a tool, and currently it's a tool that is being implemented and used, far from perfectly across the league.
I just, want to backtrack it, and before even it, this game even was kicked off, and harking back to the Atlanta game, and again all these decisions. Why are we talking about refereeing decisions? Why do we consistently have to come on here and talk about refereeing decisions in this league? Do you know any other league out there that continuously talks about refereeing decisions every single time with a team?
No,
and it's not just this team.
There's
other teams. There's other teams that also talk about this, and there's plenty of injustice to go around. But let's be honest here. We're sitting here not talking about the result as much and not talking about the tactics as much. We're sitting here again talking about refereeing decisions. And to some extent, we believe that most of these decisions went against the team that we cover here, the Earthquakes. But to another extent, how much of it also is just straight up, incorrect at the same time? I mean, again, and what does it make the league look like to the outside world, to the global world, that we're having these issues with VAR every single time? I wonder what my friends on the MLS UK show, who we got a chance to chat earlier this year, think about this every single time. It's every week. It's every day. It's getting tiring. It's getting frustrating. And so I'm not suggesting a solution here, and I can see the comments that are coming in here, and I know there's a lot of angry people out there. There's a lot of frustrated people out there.
Trust me, I saw it.
But what are your thoughts? And we saw it here tonight. We felt it here in the stadium. But Why do we continuously have to talk about this, and what's going to make the difference?
I don't think any of us here have the solutions at all. And it's really hard to point the finger at something because there's just a plethora of things that are going wrong with the officiating. In fact, I know that before every game, a lot of fans like to bring up who the officiating crew is going to be in charge of the respective game. There's never something positive to say about an official. I really just can't think of one official in the pro pool that has good reviews within the fan base, within the MLS community. I mean, it's getting out of hand, and like you said, you know, it's this cyclical pattern, and it's getting, I think it's beyond frustrating now for a lot of the players, for a lot of coaches, you know, throughout the league. Today, Jim Curtin said, well, sometimes you get them your way, sometimes you don't. He had a win under his belt. Ask the same question to Matias, and he'll have a completely different response. A response that would probably suspend him for the next year.
But that's the concern, right? Because we're talking about, you know, earlier when Tom was on the show about Matias's ability to be able to have control over the situation. And you know, I talked with the former player earlier this week, you know, over some chat, and I asked a couple questions I thought were worth sharing on the show. One was, how well do the officials know Spanish in MLS? And the answer that I got was 80% of them are fluent. The other 20% know all the words that you're not supposed to say that will get you ejected, right? And so first, you know, I think some people are wondering, like, how well, you know, do the referees understand Spanish? That kind of answers that question. But the other one was, what's the difference between MLS and Argentina in terms of the bar that would get someone kicked out? And the answer is, it's a lot harder to get kicked out in Argentina.
Oh, of course.
So there's a bar here that is set. Chris Wondolowski stepped over that line, right? And he knew that he stepped over the line, and he said, my bad, you can't say this to an official, right? And he's been in the league long enough to know his first ejection, and he is always in the referees' faces. He's always talking to the referees, but he never, until at the Atlanta game, crossed that line, and he did so in defense of Shea Salinas in the situation that Shea was in.
Getting slapped in the back of the head.
Getting slapped in the back of the head. But the answer, the question I have is, does Matias know where that line is? Is somebody communicating that line within the team, within the organization, within the league, from pro, and saying, look, I know you're from Argentina, this is what you're used to, but this is the standard in MLS. It's a higher standard. We expect more respect for the referees here, and I just feel like he's either willfully crossing this line, or he just doesn't know where it is, and I'm not sure which is true.
Well, if you know Matias Almeida, you know that he's anti-systemic, and that's just who he's always been. That's the reason why he left soccer. That's the reason why he retired at the age of 31, was because he said there was too much injustice and hypocrisy in soccer. I don't think you're going to change who he is, and I think you know, he has the reason to not change the person that he is. In fact, I think he can move the needle. I think he can bring change to the way that officiating takes place here in our country.
Look, I think maybe he's able to do that, but is it really worth sacrificing San Jose's season to do that? Look, I think after you get suspended 3 games, you have to know in that situation against Atlanta, you know, they were tied 1-1. You need to just hold on to that draw. You need to hold on to that draw, you know, take your losses, go back to San Jose. Then you get Matias ejected. You get Chris ejected. That was the collapse. I think the second ejection he gets, he needs to know in that situation, you know, even if the referees are being harsh, he can't get anywhere near the line.
Yeah, you're not trying to get in Champions League here, guys. You're trying to get one of 7 playoff spots. This is not difficult to do in MLS to make the playoffs. And Matias's decisions to pull Judson and put on Rios in these situations is smacking of someone who thinks that he has to go for 3 points when he really only needs 1.
But do we know that Almeida is making the calls, though? I mean, that's
Yeah,
what
he's the
one. He's the coach. He's the one who's made those substitutions.
Tonight.
No, not tonight. Not tonight. And by the way, I think tonight's a different story because the Quakes were playing chase. They had to get back in the game. Absolutely, it makes sense to throw in Rios, and Rios was fine, and he almost got a penalty for the team. So that's not his fault that the call got overturned.
You know, to your question about the line, I think that Matias Almeida might not know where the line is, and that's okay for him. Being the fact that he's come in and kind of revolutionized this team, and the Bushido code that he lives by, and you know, granted, you know, I think I was a little harsh on him in the LAFC game where I said, you know, let's get him down the tunnel, and so he doesn't have to get extra games to be.
No, I think that was right. I think you were in the right there.
To be suspended.
You don't want it going up in the stands.
Clearly, he got suspended for 3 games.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I think that he just has an expectation of the league to call it right, and I think that, you know, him leaving or him whatever he said to be suspended or to get sent off just happened, and that's just how he emotes, and that's who he is. I actually believe the same thing that Joel does, in the sense that you can't ask him to change, and it's part of his whole persona. It's part of his character. It's part of how he coaches, and he's just expecting to have the right calls there. And so, you know, when I look at it, I don't really see too much of a problem. To be really honest with you, I just don't. If it happens consistently, you know, we're talking about this 4, 5, 6 times down.
Twice.
Okay, it's happened twice. Good. It's happened twice. Okay. Great. Cool. Good for him. I mean, it's happened twice. But if we're 5, 6 times down, 4, 5, 6 times down, then we might need to revisit this conversation.
But now I
just think he's an emotional guy that loves the game. He's a football romantic at heart, and he just is expressing himself in his aura, in his way. And so when I saw the incident the first time, it taught me actually how he reacts to these. And it is just this utter frustration that he expects it to be called the right way. So in my mind, I don't have too much of an issue with it, but him not being on the sideline, I think, does affect the team because he is the conductor of this orchestra, and quite rightly so. So that's where I stand with that.
I don't think it's convenient for either Matias to leave the league, or for, you know, for MLS to run him out. Look, Matias is not going to change who he is, and obviously MLS and Pro are going to stand firm on what they think is right. It's going to be a continuous tug-of-war battle. At the end, there's only one solution, and that's compromise. And I was talking about that with Tom Marshall. Now, the big question is, when is that going to happen?
I don't think that's going to happen by the end of the season. Only a couple weeks left in the regular season. I don't think there's time to patch that. The only thing for me that gives me any condolence is that Chris Wondolowski was able to say whatever he wanted to the referees without he was in the stands watching the game with the Ultras today.
And take his shirt off without getting a card.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Tactically, Judson, yellow card. You know, we have a weekly conversation about Judson. I think that folks that are tuning in obviously know that I have a strong affinity for his position and the way that he plays it, and it is a significant loss. But Jamon, you know, we were sitting next to each other in the press box, and you know this by the data that you run and the statistics and analytics that you look at. This is a really, really big blow for the Quakes. On Sunday.
The Quakes don't have anyone to replace Judson. He brings skills that are very difficult actually for teams to find. That ability to go sideline to sideline and cover as much field as he does. He's in the league, the only person that's been compared to him in that ability to cover ground is Diego Chara. That's it. And so, you know, he's one of a kind.
Generational player, by the way, Diego Chara.
Generational player. And so, look, the Quakes are not going to be able to replace him. That means that they're going to have to be able to bring, you know, probably a little bit different look. against the Sounders. And if you think back a little bit to preseason, right, when we saw the Quakes playing the Sounders the first time, Joel and I actually talked a little bit about that. Not so sure about whether Judson's going to be able to make it in this league because he had not yet adjusted to that type of speed.
That was an ongoing conversation throughout the first couple of games of the season. We were having that conversation for the first couple of months.
Right, but specifically it was the Sounders preseason game that we saw it the first time, and he got beat down the sideline. I can't trying to remember who beat him in that situation, but he got beat down the sideline bad, and it was a concern. So
it might have been Jordan Morris. I think it might have been Jordan
Morris. He was
Morris.
injured at that time.
And I think it was Jordan. I think he's right. I think it was Jordan. But anyway, he got beat down the sideline, and then the last game against the Sounders, he really kind of was able to show what he can do. Now they're going to have to contend with that type of speed from a player like a Jordan Morris without that sideline to sideline ability to shut down a counterattack. In my mind, that's the only thing that Sounders bring that I think is able to actually beat the Quakes, here at Avaya Stadium. So I'll be very interested to see, who Matias puts on the field.
Probably Godoy.
Yeah.
Don't you all think?
I would think
Go
the
back
Godoy.
to that pairing of Godoy and Jackson Yule in the midfield.
Right, but the last time we saw that was the LAFC game,
Right.
which didn't go so well.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
There are really no good options for the Quakes at this point.
No, not really.
Just like there wasn't a good option on the right side, on the right wing. Tonight, Fierro's just wasn't enough.
I think Shea Salinas was a good option. He has we talked about this for a couple of shows now. I think he's a good option. He has the experience needed in these big games. He can get down the line and put those balls in. He's very consistent. You know what he's bringing to the table. I think he was a good option, but clearly Matias Almeida doesn't see the same way.
The Quakes don't play a lot of big games that had as much meaning as a game like tonight does. The thing that you can most compare it to is the Stanford Stadium games.
Yeah.
And who shows up there time after time after time under pressure? It's Shea Salinas. Had the option to put him on the field tonight, and he didn't do it. And I think he paid the price.
Good point.
And there's obviously a reason why Shea Salinas isn't in the 11 either, though. And, clearly there is a reason why Carlos Fierro is getting starts over Shea Salinas. And I think it goes back to, what we were talking about earlier with Tom and the fact that this is a Matias Almeida player that he's brought in. He trusts him, he's very loyal to him, and he's loyal back to Matias Almeida. And I think that players that buy in, you see them on the field. Players that might not necessarily might not buy in, you don't exactly see him as much. And
I think Shea Salinas has bought in, though.
I completely bought in.
well,
I
I'm
mean,
not saying he's not, but I'm just saying there's a reason why Carlos Fierro is picked over him and why.
Yeah, he's not in favor.
So
Yeah, but I think that might be Matias with a little bit of blinders there too, because there's no two people on this squad that outwork people more than Shea Salinas and Chris Wondolowski. There's a reason they've been here as long as they have, because every manager looks at them and says, "I want the other players to aspire to be like these guys."
Right.
They set the bar for everybody else on the team.
to answer your question, Joel Veles, who's starting for Judson on Sunday, Godoy, question mark, yes. I think possibly, but who knows what's going to happen there. Karn Johal, what happened to the final ball tonight? Where were all the low-driven crosses, especially when floated deliveries seem to go nowhere every time?
I think those
thoughts, and I know, Alex, you were chatting a little bit about this in the press box during the game,
Espinosa,
too.
you're not going to get a ball on the ground.
I think those low-driven balls were in the stands with Christian Espinosa. Fierro's service really was poor. He put in a lot of lofting floaters to the near post that didn't have a name on it. None of them found Denny, who's in
direction.
it all. I think they've really missed Espinosa.
The one good low ball was from Houston and went in the back of the net.
Yeah, that's it.
There you go.
That's all you got.
Hoovie Games, welcome back to the show. You always write some good questions, Hoovie Games. And who do you think needs to step up the most in the next 2 games to help bring the team over the playoff line?
The revival of Christian Espinosa, maybe. Coming back from the suspension and having not really tallied a ton of goals or a ton of assists in the last couple of games, obviously directly linked to the fact that the Quakes haven't really had that spark in the attack. I think, like I've been repeating this time and time again this season, when you have an effective Espinosa, you have an effective Vaco. When you have an effective Vaco, you have an effective Chris Wondolowski, whoever's up top. So I think a lot of the pressure will rest on his shoulders. This team, time and time again, has relied on Espinosa in crucial moments this season. I think that does not change this coming Sunday.
I'm going to actually go with Jackson Yule in this situation. And I say that because, one, we're going to have to play a game, obviously, without Judson. So that's going to mean that in some way or another, Jackson's going to have to adjust to the situation and in the game based upon who he's paired with. He stepped up in moments tonight, and then defensively in a couple situations he didn't. And it's going to be important for him to play a very consistent game. Think of the players on Seattle and on Portland who are going to be in his vicinity over these next couple games, right? Yeah. You're going to have the Christian Roldans. You're going to have the Nico Laderos. Yep. You're going to have the Diego Charas. You're going to have the Diego Valeris. That's where he's going to operate. He's going to have to beat them on the attacking side. He's going to have to really help shut them down on the defensive side. I think a lot of responsibility on Jackson Yule.
I agree, and I think actually in the first half was one of his strongest performances in a Quakes shirt. He obviously scored the first goal for the Quakes. That was his third goal for the club. And then right at the start of the second half, he comes out and he's the man driving the ball forward up the middle of the pitch. And then he's the man who creates, and I think would have gotten the assist had the goal been allowed to stand. But then I think it was also his energy that was deflated the most by the goal. And I think that, it'll come with experience, the ability to maintain that focus. And I think tonight he lost it. He slipped right in front of
first goal.
Right in front of Seattle's,
Philadelphia's
equalizing goal. And,
exactly.
That was a turning point. And I don't
know
think
if
he really
it was
recovered.
him slipping or him or just committing to that
Maybe
tackle.
Over-committing too much.
Exactly.
Any bright spots for you tonight? Was it Danny Houston? Was it Jackson Yule? Was it Vega? Was it Florian Youngworth? Who did you see? What did you see? Tactical shape? Anything different? Etc.
I'll go back to Jackson, because I do think exactly what Alex said there. He did really kind of bring it in the first half. He is a young player, and he's going to need to understand that in these types of moments, when the team has a setback, unfortunately, players like him are thinking maybe a little bit too much back to last season, when the team would have a setback and the team would just collapse. I mean, think back to the last time that a goal was taken back here at Avaya Stadium. That was against Atlanta. They had a lead in that game,
right,
of 3-0, if I remember right. They were going to go up 4-0. If the goal had stood, the team collapsed around that. I'm just concerned that some of the players are still a little bit too fragile from last season, and now this current run of form has them also a little bit fragile. But I do think he showed up in the first half tonight. I think he's got to bring 90 minutes of that in the next two games. The Quakes have, maybe with a little bit of help, will find themselves in the 7th playoff spot.
I would say my man of the match was Chris Wondolowski, even though he didn't get on the field. I think he made...
Yeah, most of the tweets.
He did. I think he made a horrible error against Atlanta in getting sent off and being suspended. But then I think he acknowledged that, and he repaid the fans. He showed that he is standing there with them. And it was, I think, a true act of devotion and shows his passion for this club, that he was willing to stand there with the Ultras. I don't know how many other players would have been comfortable to do that and to lead their supporters groups like he did, to rip off his shirt after the goal. I think that was a true show of his love for this club. And that'll be one of the lasting memories, I think, no matter what happens the rest of the season.
Yeah, I can only second that. I think Wando's, performance off the field tonight was...
I don't think it was a performance, though. I think that was very genuine, his passion for the club. But
it really was, and I think it was an act of authenticity, right? Yeah. It's just who he is. He is the people's player. There's no one that connects more with a fan base, in my opinion, in this league than Chris Wondolowski. I was actually roaming the stands and just paying close attention to everything that was happening in that Ultras section, and I mean, not hundreds, but dozens of fans were lining up wanting to get a photo with Chris, and Chris not only did take the photo, but he took his time, to share these valuable actions with certain fans. It was just really, really, just a really historic, circumstance. And I think all in all, it's the highlight of today's match day.
And it's not just been tonight. Every game after the game, every game at Avaya Stadium, he's out signing autographs at the back gate later than anybody else. It's true passion for his club.
Yeah, you want that from a captain, and we've chatted about this before. Chris Wondolowski breaks down the fourth wall, the fifth wall, shakes hands, gives hugs, takes selfies, spends time with everyone, and it's the way that he was raised. It's his education at Chico State. It's the fact that he was with this team in 2005, only to be shipped to Houston, only to be playing in the second team in Houston, then having to make his way onto the first team in Houston, then in 2009 having the opportunity to come back to the Earthquakes, scoring a goal in the 90th minute against Kansas City. I remember it vividly, to tie the game. And he's just taken off ever since. And, again, you guys talk about authenticity, him being so genuine of a person.
It's also his native blood, by the way.
Yeah, of course. From Nathan Zaragoza, do you think the Quakes have enough depth on the team in terms of scorers? Obviously, Wando is a big factor, but when he hasn't played, we really feel his absence.
I think that there's more goals in Espinoza than we've seen. I think there's been many times that he's been robbed by the post, by the crossbar.
Or he skies it over just an inch
yeah,
or two.
and in fact, I think it was a couple games ago. He hit one, and Jake from Earthquakes PR said, imagine how many highlight goals we could have had this season if he just made a couple of those opportunities. I think if he comes back next year, I think you're going to see him get something more around the lines of 10 goals. I think he has that in him. He has to get in mind a little bit to be a little bit more of a goal scorer and a little bit less of just the assist guy. And I think if he can develop a slightly different mindset, he will be able to get to that. Danny Houston has to find his form, guys.
Yeah.
He
has
to
nice
be able.
Tonight.
He had a nice assist tonight.
I thought he was okay.
And last year, when everything else would kind of fall apart, he would snatch goals out of the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
We haven't seen that Danny this season. So they do have the scorers. It's just that they're not very consistent.
Right. We went from last year, Wando saying Danny Husen is going to be the Golden Boot winner this year, to Danny Husen, not even racking up 5 goals with 2 games left to play this season, and us praising him for an assist that he had in his first start in I don't know how many games. It's the Danny Husen of 2019. A Danny Husen that just has not been productive, but most importantly hasn't been clinical. And I think he showed that today, time and time again. He had a couple of chances inside the box where he should have pulled the trigger much sooner, but decided to dance around the box, dance around a couple defenders, and then his pass led to nothing. So
it's confidence, though.
Yeah. It's confidence.
He's just to me, it seems like he's just a player that's lacking confidence because Wando's been so clinical this season. I actually think, in terms of goals per game or for the goals per minute, this is his best season, or second, third best season of his career behind 2012. And look, I think that means that Danny hasn't been able to get consistent minutes with this team. And so it'll be interesting to see how the dynamic changes next season when he's able to get more solid minutes up top.
Throwing it back to you, Alex, and we'll come back down the line here. Final thoughts from tonight.
It's a real, as I said at the top of the show, it's a really gutting loss. Now San Jose are on the outside looking in, and if you at the end of the season you could look back and say, well, with Judson getting a yellow card suspension, this could be the game that very may well deny the Quakes a spot in the playoffs.
The Quakes don't fully control their destiny at this point, but if they get 6 points, then the chance is very high that they're still going to be able to make the playoffs. So they have to come to each game with the mindset of we have to take the 3 points, and they have to go all out and try to get those, because the opportunity's there for the taking. The teams that they're battling for playoff position with have just not been consistent at all. Portland had a 2-0 lead tonight and lost it in the last 10 minutes of the game, and one of those was a penalty in the 98th minute, 8 minutes into stoppage time. So, who knows what's going to happen with FC Dallas and Portland over the next couple games, but the Quakes have their opportunity because they go head-to-head with Portland in the last game of the season on the road.
Yeah, there's no time to lament anymore for the San Jose Earthquakes. If it is that they have to take on the Seattle Sounders and Pro at the same time on Sunday, then so be it. They are optionless at this point. They have to go out. They have to get the 3 points. I think everyone within the locker room knows that, although they aren't feeling the best. There's just no more excuses anymore. They're gonna have to get past. They're gonna have to get through it. Luckily, they'll have Chris Wondolowski and Matias Almeida leading the charge, as well as Cristian Espinosa. Like you said, it's not really in their hands. But if you ask me who I see between the Quakes and Dallas or Portland, I would say I see Portland and the Quakes making it in.
Joel Soria also predicted that the Quakes would be challenging for the 7th playoff position this year early on in our beginning of this show, now in episode number 31. It seems to be drama with this Quakes team and with this Quakes side, and they've got to break the cycle. And so winning cures a lot of things. In the beginning of the year, again, I referred to it kind of like as this Hamlet, Macbeth, and then they had this Midsummer Night's Dream, this resurgence. And now a little bit of the kind of a comedy of errors. But if they can kind of switch into to more of like an As You Like It, more comedic Shakespearean mode, if you get my drift here, they probably will be sailing fine, but most of you probably don't. So winning cures everything, and getting the second goal and killing the game off also does too, and the Quakes failed to do that tonight, and that's the reason why they were in the position that they are in this evening. In addition to the VAR, and the fans have every right to feel the injustice and in some of these calls. There was also a question here about what we're going to do when the season is over. We don't know yet, but if you have any suggestions for us besides sleeping, you let us know. We would love, if the Quakes do make the playoffs, to be able to cover that game or 2 or 3 or 4 for you. And we're going to do everything that we can in our power to do that, because we enjoy having this show, and we enjoy everybody for tuning into this show. This is your show too. And your questions, your comments, you guys interacting with one another here is really what builds community and helps place soccer, a game that we all love, firmly in our own community, in our own locale, in our own region, and sets the tone for that. And we have the unique opportunity to come on the air every week, week in, week out with you. So for Tom Marshall, who was on our show earlier this evening, thanks so much for being a part of our show. Alex Morgan, Jamon Moore, Joel Soria, Charles Wollin, our executive producer and director, Jason Sholl, associate producer, Aaron Sholl, and our sub, Key Grip, and associate producer tonight, Evan Moore, for being here. Shout out to Jeff Weisinger as well, who is a supporter of ours and has been watching our show here from the studio at Avaya Stadium. We'll see you next time from our regular studio next week. Good night. Take care. Bye-bye.